This is the bridge that came on the guitar when it arrived at the shop. Definitely not the original bridge. It doesn't fit the top well at all. It's really only making contact at the very edges. In the middle there's more than a 1/16 of an inch gap between the soundboard and the bottom of the bridge. So I'm going to make a new one. I like to get the bridge base fitting the top, making contact all the way across. It's going to be really difficult with this guitar because the top of the guitar, I think just the way it was carved, it rises at the perimeter, but then it's sort of a plateau right across the top. It's almost completely flat. So not a continuous arch the way I'm accustomed to dealing with guitars. So it might take a little extra time. Now I know the original L7s had a rosewood bridge. I'm going to use Ebony though, just because I think it will last longer, and I'm really not trying to exactly duplicate all of the features of the original. I think upgrading to Ebony will be an improvement. So I have this piece of ebony that I'll use to cut up and make a new bridge. I cut the ebony and then thickness sanded it down to 5/8. That's the thickness of the bridge base. And it's 5 1/4 inches long. Well, it's a little longer than that right now, but when I finish, it'll be 5 1/4. So I put some white paint on the ebony so that I can see what I'm doing. Hard to work with pencils on black ebony. And what I'm doing now, I'm going to trace the profile of the top onto the white paint. Don't know how well it shows here, but I can see it. And I will just roughly bandsaw this out and then do a little sanding on my oscillating spindle sander to get close, and then I'll proceed to actually fit the base to the top of the guitar. Well, that base is already fitting better than the first bridge base, but I want to improve on that. So what I'm going to do is very carefully tape a piece of sandpaper to the top and then move the ebony just a little bit back and forth on the sandpaper and sand away everything right under where the bridge is actually going to sit. I can't make broad strokes with the base because the contour of the top changes. So if I'm sanding out here, I would get a different shape than if I'm sanding back here. So I want to stay just within about a 1/2 inch of where the bridge is going to sit on the guitar when it's done. That 60 grit paper that is duct taped to the top, it works pretty well. I just have to be careful not to have any grit under the paper, but I've never had any trouble with this method, and there's still a little bit of final sanding to do, final buffing to do anyway, so if this mars the finish in any way, it'll all be buffed out. So now what I'm going to do, like I said, is just very slowly go back and forth then I can see where the high spots are. That's what's going to get sanded away first, and eventually I'll see ebony dust all along here, and that'll be a good indicator that I'm making contact all the way across the soundboard. One thing I have to be very careful of is not letting the ebony rock back and forth. I don't want to curve the base from front to back, so I just have to really concentrate on keeping it upright. So there's ebony dust pretty much all the way across the bridge now, and I can see sanding scratches all the way along the bottom. So I'd say I've gotten pretty close to the contour of the top. Now I'm going to just carefully peel off the duct tape. I've never had any trouble with this, and I would hate to start now. But if the lacquer is adhering as it should to the wood, then it really shouldn't peel off just because of some tenacious tape. So what I'll do now is just switch to 100 grit paper and do the same thing again, just to get the sanding scratches smaller on the base, because the 60 grit leaves some pretty deep grooves in the wood, and once this sits on the guitar for a while, those grooves could leave impressions on the lacquer. So the grooves from 100 grit paper will be considerably smaller. And then after I do the 100 grit, I'll actually just sand by hand to get the 100 grit scratches out. Now that's how the bridge base is supposed to fit, or at least my way of building archtop bridges. So no gaps anywhere, and now I can cut off the base, separate it from what will become the saddle. I'm going to use this same piece of ebony to make the saddle. Here's the roughed out bridge saddle. I marked an arc where how I want the top to curve, and so I'll plane this down now. Here I have a maple block with 2 holes drilled in it 3 inches apart, and those holes will be the guides for drilling the thumb wheel posts in both the base and the saddle of the bridge. You can see it's on the drill press now with the base, and once I get those holes drilled, then I'll move the block, and here I am drilling the holes into the saddle. I've marked the saddle line, and now I'll make some saw cuts and hollow out the parts I don't need anymore. Now I'll refine the shape of the bridge base using a bandsaw and a drum sander, and finally chisels and sandpaper and scrapers. I buffed the base to a high shine right now, but I will wait to polish the saddle until after I've made the final adjustments to its height once the strings get put on. Thanks for watching, and remember to subscribe to this channel if you're enjoying the content.